Anyway, I'm ready to rock.
It's all good. All right. So finally, after a couple of years of, we got Jericho on. Thank you. We got my boy Frankie Kazarian, our friend of the show, super genius himself, Mark Madden.
Debatable about the super.
And why would you say that's debatable, Disco?
Because IQ diminishes over time, studies have shown.
How have you been doing K100 for like 6 years and you still don't have a microphone? You sound like shit. How can that even be possible?
I have no idea why that is, because it sounds fine in post.
It's because they can't polish shit. That's why, Jericho.
Listen, I've got Joe sent all of us the same microphones, Rove Connect. Yeah. I have the exact same one that these other two guys have. I have no clue.
$200 headset.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, what's the format here?
So basically the format is, and if we want to change anything or add anything, please do, because, I'm a big fan of rock and roll, but I don't know as much as our guest, and I want to see what their choices are. So basically I was thinking maybe 5-6 top rock, your favorite rock groups. Give me a little information on them, of why and maybe some honorable mention, and maybe some solo singers. You know what I'm saying? Is that cool to you guys?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, man. Yep.
All right. So let's start it off with, do you want to go like everybody give their number 5 and we go work up to number 1 and then give our honorable mentions, or do you want to go from 1 to 5? It doesn't matter.
1.
Just do 1 through 5. Each guy 1 through 5. We can rip off that, I think.
All right. Let's start off with our boy Chris Jericho. Your number 1 top group and why?
Well, it's hard to just say like this is my top group and why. So if you want to pick 5, I'll just give you 5 in no particular order.
Cool.
I mean, the first one that I'll say right now is the Stones.
Right.
I mean, definitely the greatest rock and roll band of all time. I just saw them live a couple weeks ago, and nothing changes. They're not human. They're Stones. It's crazy how active and how vibrant the band is. And Mick, even the way he walks, no limping or lilting of his gait, his singing is great. They've got, they are just unbelievable to watch, and it's a fucking blast. And the new record is one of their best, or it's their best since the 70s. So I always have to go with the Stones. So many great. Ma?
How old is Mick Jagger?
In the 70s.
80.
He's 80.
He's 80 under the question.
Yeah, and so is Keith. Keith is 80 as well. Now, Keith looks older, but he still doesn't look or act 80. It's unbelievable. Like, to explain it to you guys like, yeah. When you go, you're like, I can't fucking believe this. It's not real.
They're here next Tuesday. And
yeah,
someone's trying to sell me tickets. Yeah,
I saw him in Vegas, and Jericho's right on the money. And it's like time stood still. You can't believe what you're seeing.
Right. I equated it's like going to like Jurassic Park, and you see this ancient, powerful, amazing T-Rex creature that as soon as it's gone, there'll never be another one like it. Like there'll never be another Stones. It's impossible to be. And it's just like the Stones, like they have to live forever, and that's why I love going to see them when they tour, because you never know. But when you go, it's not like a bunch of old guys wandering around. Like there's bands 30 years younger. I mean,
right.
You're talking about fucking Motley Crue is a joke. It's terrible. And you go to the Stones, and it's like every band needs to aspire to be like the Stones.
Let me ask you, Mark, a question. Because you know how sometimes when you go see a singer that you like, but they don't really have the vocals anymore, and the background has to help them. How strong is his vocal still at 80?
Oh, still really strong.
Still really strong, like Mark said. And also, too, they're smart because, I mean, Mick never had a super high range. But for the stuff that's high, they've got 3 background singers. Like the Stones, they've got the 3 Stones, and there's like 9 people in the back. There's a whole freaking orchestra back there, and 3 singers. So anything like Misused kind of high, Mick still hits it, but they got the chicks singing the parts as well. So it just fits. It works.
And it's not a sad show. Like you go to some older groups, and it's like you sense that they're hanging on, and it's just kind of. Pathetic's too strong a word because I wouldn't disrespect them like that. But the Stones are still the Stones. It's still vibrant. It's still uplifting. Like I saw Greta Van Fleet recently, who I love, and they're all in their mid-20s, and the Stones had just as much energy.
Wow.
And I want to make a point about the Stones too. It's a good testament to how miserable rock has been in like the past like 20, 25 years. Like there's no new bands, to the point that at 80 years old, the Stones are still out there selling out places. Like you look up and there's literally not one single empty seat in the house.
Well, I think that's because they're still the Stones. They're not they're not a parody of what they used to be. They're still the same kick-ass band they were like in the 60s.
That's exactly right. You go to that show like freaking like Ronnie Wood and Keith too. Keith played the best I've ever seen him play a couple weeks ago. And Ronnie Wood is like, you think Slash is like a great player? He's a direct descendant of Ron Wood. Like Ron Wood is a fucking badass player. And I'll say one more thing. When you go to a Stone show, it's not a concert, it's a cultural event. It's like going to the Super Bowl. There's all ages, races, creeds, nationalities, everything. It's just like people are just there, and
you know who I imagine is a lot like that? Maybe, I don't know. I haven't gone to their concert. Kiss.
Kiss was like that, but Kiss a little bit, and Kiss kind of quality-wise went down a little bit because Paul's vocals went down a bit, because that's very high singing there. But Kiss had that too. Yeah. But another thing I love about the Stones, there's no plastic surgery on that stage. Mick is 80. He's not trying to get the shit done. He's like, fuck, this is what I look like, motherfucker. Check the shit out, So,
right. I'm Mick Jagger. I don't need to change shit.
Exactly.
Give me your number one, Disco.
My number one?
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin.
Led Zeppelin.
Led Zeppelin. Okay. Without a doubt. Just because if you really go back and like you get in a rabbit hole one day and just go back and listen to like a collection of Led Zeppelin songs, like 10 to 15 of them, right? Is that every song is very busy. It's like they had so many ideas. Like it's like so a lot of the songs, there's 3 songs in one. They go off on riffs, just like different. Like my favorite Zeppelin song of all time is "Nobody's Fault But Mine." Okay, because it kicks hard. I think that would be a great re-entrance music for anybody. Okay, the way that song kicks, right? But like they have so many songs where just like you're wondering like, how did these guys think of all this and like come out, like Cashmere's like 11 minutes. Yeah. And just when there's like so many different directions and it's like, it's not.
Well, to be fair, they stole a lot of it. They didn't steal. I'm not saying that critically, but they did.
Right.
Yeah. But I always thought the key with Led Zeppelin is their production. I thought Jimmy Page in a very early time frame in where production was making advances was just a musical genius. The way he packaged and presented and like you said, the time changes, the intricacy. He was one of the very first to pioneer that.
Right.
Yeah, the thing with Zeppelin too is like you got to keep this in mind. It's the same thing with the Beatles, who are probably going to be on this list at some point.
Right.
They had such an eclectic career, and it was very short. I mean, Zeppelin, you're talking 10 years, Beatles are 9. And think about all the different styles of music that they played and were able to incorporate that still always remained. It always remains Zeppelin, and whether it's super hard rock like, rock and roll or Heartbreaker, or whether it's, you mentioned Kashmir is a little bit more, East Indian.
How many more times?
Yeah,
on this journey,
Dire Maker, which is actually pronounced Jamaica, which is reggae. It's like there's so many styles that they have, but it was such a short career. Like they were done in 79.
It is, but however, let me just finish my final summation. Led Zeppelin. I would argue that Led Zeppelin has more, like a quantity, more A-list songs than any other the bands that we'll talk about. That would be my take on Zeppelin. We can argue that, but I think it'd be hard pressed to disagree with that.
Outside of the Beatles, that might be true.
I mean, once again, I always love going to concerts, like you mentioned, like we put together the ultimate Zeppelin set list, or the ultimate Stones or Beatles, or guys like Elton John. You could put together a 20-song set, and then another 20-song set,
right,
and then even another 20-song set. They're all different from the others. Right. Because they have so many fucking great songs.
And you want to hear all those songs, all 50.
Yeah. Let me add this because this happened to me with Zeppelin and the Beatles. By the way, Zeppelin's my number 2 group, so I'll just throw it in here while piggyback off of disco. Yeah. So when I was growing up, my uncle was a hippie, and so he had this van that he was always in, smoking weed, and fucking playing Led Zeppelin music. And I remember I was too young to appreciate it, and I always used to think, what type of bullshit is this? And you must be, you must have to be on drugs to understand what the fuck this is even about. Not truly appreciating the brilliance of this band. You know what I'm saying? But it was all around me. And bro, and just when I got into them, just Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, Bond. I mean, what a kick-ass group. All the experimentation they did. As you said, they took a lot of stuff from other people, but they created it in their own because they were really huge in the blues, right?
Yeah.
Just like the Stones. Yeah.
That's it. Chris, you go see Madden still travels to go see a lot of Madden.
Right, I have an empty life and I'm dead inside.
Right, so he sees tons of concerts. Chris, how many concerts do you see? Because it's funny because I know Dolph was a big rock fan too, because he would come in off the road in the middle of a road trip, and it'd be a Saturday night, Metallica's playing at T-Mobile, and he'd come and see them and everything, then just go fly out in the morning, go back on the road and stuff.
I have no problems. I mean, I was just in Vegas a couple weeks ago to see the Scorpions residency. So I'll go to the bands. It's one of the things I have a job and I don't mind spending money to go to a show. I don't like getting comp tickets, even if the guys are friends, because I want to be as close to the front as I can. Cool thing about Stones is that I know they're head of security. So every time I go, I'm right at the catwalk where Mick walks by, and I can get used to that. So I want to be right in the mix. I had tickets for the last Kiss show at Madison Square Garden in the front row. And I was like, fuck it. I don't care how much it costs. I want to be front row. I didn't.
Well, you're a rock too.
I didn't go. I had to sell them to a fan, but I don't mind paying for concerts, and I don't mind flying to a concert because.
So me too. I went to that Kiss show as well, not in the front row because I don't get Jericho money, but nonetheless, it was great. And to me, stuff like that is really worth it. I mean, I'm older. I have money. It's what else am I going to do with it? Like my favorite band, and we're not going to discuss them long because, Jericho's heard of them. My favorite band is UFO. Okay, Jericho, don't smirk, Jericho. You covered the UFO song.
Eddie Trunk's favorite band is UFO as well. People your age love that band.
Yeah, and I
give me a little bit. Give me Mark. I know you brought them up before once, but I don't remember them too much. Give me and some people that don't know about them some stuff on them.
Michael Schenker on guitar, really pony guitar sound, lower range vocals with Phil Mon, Pete Way, the ultimate rock and roller on bass, a good friend of mine till he passed away a few years ago. Just like Heavy Melodic Rock.
What makes them number one? What makes them number one for you?
Just everything I just did. Heavy melodic rock. Some great riffs, Too Hot to Handle, shoot, just great stuff.
Let me step in, Mark, so I can make it a little bit more accessible to people that might not know. So UFO is kind of like an earlier version of the Scorpions. If you like the Scorpions in the 80s, you'd probably like UFO in the 70s because they were kind of like the original version of what the Scorpions became. And they really were huge in about 75 to 78 range. So guys Madden's age, later 50s, super like James Hetfield and Kirk Hammett are huge UFO fans.
Right.
Because the guitar player, Michael Schenker, was like an early guitar hero, pre-Van Halen, pre-Randy Rhoads. He was kind of one of the first hotshot rock and roll guitar players, and that attracted a lot of people to that band as well.
Why have you never heard of these guys?
They couldn't keep it together. They had a top 5 album with their live album, Strangers in the Night, in the late 70s, and then the guitar player left, and I've known most of the guys because I'm like me and Eddie Trunk are the two biggest UFO fans. They're fucked up. I mean, I saw the guitar player take a swing at the singer on stage at a concert. And that was the last time the guitar player, Schenker, ever played with them. Pete Way was a lifelong addict. I mean, a good friend of mine, but that's what he was. So
they're no longer together.
No, they had a lineup until about 3 years ago of the singer, the drummer, and a few other guys. But they just packed it in.
Yeah, you've seen them live, have you? Because they've had a lot of angles throughout the years, like contentious relationships. And you've seen them live, meltdown.
He's falling off the stage. He's just I've seen them over 40 times. It's just there's always a story to tell. Years later, I said to Phil, the singer, I showed him my ticket and my backstage pass from when they had the fight on stage when Schenker left the group for good. And he apologized. And I said, Phil, there's no need to apologize. I'm a lifelong UFO fan. It was kind of cool to see one of the stories everybody talked about.
You know what's kind of funny? Do you remember that show, which was excellent, and I wish they'd bring it back, Behind the Music?
Yeah.
Bro, it didn't matter if it was rap. It didn't matter if it was pop. It didn't matter if it was any fucking genre. It was always the same problem. Groups, there's always infighting. There's always creativity difference, or there's always drug issues. And they all almost invariably fight when they're young. Then they get old and they're like, bro, we got money to make. Yeah. And maybe we need to get the band back together. And almost everybody, okay. Frankie,
some of them still fight till they're old. Sorry, Konnan. Some of them still fight till they're older. Like Fleetwood Mac has been feuding with each other for decades. You know? And then they occasionally come back, but then like I won't see Fleetwood Mac without Lindsey Buckingham. I just won't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but they were like married, so they even had other issues.
Yeah.
But
Okay. They all
basically kicked him out not too long ago.
Right? Stevie Nicks
did what?
Kicked out Lindsey Buckingham of Fleetwood Mac.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
Said it's either him or me, and they picked her.
Frankie, who's your number one?
My number one's Metallica. That's no real secret,
I knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah, that's that's the be all end all for me. Metallica. When I first heard them, I can equate it to like the first time I ever saw wrestling was WrestleMania 1. I put in a video tape and it was WrestleMania 1, and I was obsessed, hooked, and my life would never be the same. Same thing when I discovered Metallica. Something about that sound. The fact that they pretty much invented the genre of thrash metal, and then years later,
what's the difference between thrash metal and heavy metal?
So I mean, thrash metal was very much based on speed,
right?
Like like it was like very just like BPMs.
Would you throw Pantera in there as thrash metal or no?
Yeah,
absolutely.
The thrash metal basically started with like Motorhead. And so Metallica was a direct disciple of Motorhead, and that's just very, like Frankie said, it's very punk rock oriented, very fast, but very heavy.
Perfect example. To one song that defines thrash metal, Shortest Straw will be like a perfect, so it's like kind of calling Machine Gun, It's just
the thing about Metallica.
Yesterday,
to jump what Frankie's saying is, I got into Metallica in 1985. For Ride the Lightning record, and when this fucking thing came out, there was nobody who played that fast and that heavy. Nobody. And it's funny because now you go to a strip club and a chick's dancing to Seek and Destroy, or they're playing Enter Sandman at a hockey game or Ride the Lightning or whatever.
Wow, that's true.
This music was not played anywhere.
Right.
People were like, what? No one understood it. It was so fast, so heavy. And I was watching. I got to send this to you, Frankie. I got the other day from Toronto '86. Metallica. It's called the fastest Metallica concert. Everything is even faster. Like faster, Bubba's. It's so fast, and they're so young and just crazy and just nuts.
Plus, is this with Cliff right now before or after Cliff?
With Jason.
One of Jason's first shows, then.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the end of '86. Yeah. Okay.
So
did you guys?
Go ahead. Let me throw a Metallica question at Frankie and Jericho. I'm really curious to hear your opinion. I'm a big Metallica guy too. I've seen them a ton of times. I actually slightly prefer Megadeth, and I wonder how Metallica would have turned out had Mustaine stayed, because he wrote like a poppier version of speed metal. Like his songs in Megadeth, they're like shorter. They're more to the point. That's kind of why. And again, I'm not ripping Metallica. I just like that kind of song.
Yeah, I love Megadeth too, but James and Dave Mustaine and Lars could never have existed together.
Well, that's right.
Three uber alpha males, and it just never have worked. Megadeth's created a whole industry to themselves, and they're an awesome band. And then Mustaine's the best guitar player out of all of them. But there's something between James and Lars, and I'll explain this to Konnan. So Lars Ulrich is like the backbone of Metallica for attitude, and James is kind of the muso. He's the riff guy. And people kind of bag on Lars sometimes for his drumming skills, but those guys together are unstoppable. There is no other drummer that could be in Metallica than Lars. Oh, Lars Ulrich sucks, and this, I think, go fuck yourself. Him and James lock in together like no other rhythm section in heavy metal, or maybe even in rock and roll. And that, to me, I still love the chemistry between the two of them. And Frank will attest to this. They're another band, much like the Stones, that are still better than ever. And their material is great. They look great. Lars is like, have you seen Lars lately, Frankie? Bruce Lee, he's all cut up and shit. He's stopped drinking and he's a vegan now. Those guys on stage, sometimes James will just walk over to Lars and just stand beside him on the fucking set and just they're little kids again. You know, they're 18-year-old kids. And
James sounds better than ever, especially on this last album. And when I saw him live last summer, he sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question.
Let me ask Chris and Frankie one thing. Sorry, just real quick, Di. Did you guys ever kind of like turn against Metallica or we know when they cut their hair, the Napster thing, or
No.
I defend Saint Anger.
You did.
And that's arguably their least popular album. But Saint Anger is the perfect record for where they were as a band at the time. It's just all riff. It's all fucking attitude.
When you're a fan of a band, like when Load came out, which was 96, and once again, I'll explain it to Konnan because I know you're always interested in this stuff. They changed everything. They cut their hair. Even stuff like the logo changed. And as a fan, you're like, what? They fucking changed their logo? What the fuck is this? And they cut their hair and they're wearing makeup and they're playing songs that are like 3-4 minute moody. Like it was a tough pill to swallow at the time because our thrash band was gone. But it was part of what made them grow and they went back to thrash. And you look at any great band has a period where it's a little bit out of like 80s Stones is really weird, or 80s Rush when they went super keyboard and there's not hardly any guitar on it. Like, but in the longevity of a band, you stick with them through all the phases and you enjoy it, and you understand. Like to me, like people bag on. Let me just say one thing. Like people bag on Van Halen 3 or Iron Maiden, the X Factor. It's still fucking Eddie Van Halen. It's still Steve Harris, the guys who created bands. Give them some fucking slack, man. If they think it's good, then let's figure out what's good about this and enjoy it for what it is.
What was the bridge song they used to consider? Because you were probably Metallica fans before the rest of the country really became thing. Would you say that Enter Sandman was the bridge song that like, holy shit, what
that's
are these guys? Yeah, right.
Yeah,
that one had up in the mainstream.
Sandman's the one where chicks started going to Metallica shows.
Yeah. One had that video where they used the footage from that war movie, and I remember that playing all the time.
But it was still Metallica.
Yeah,
it wasn't like when Foreigner crossed over with the sappy ballad.
Right.
It was still Metallica with the song that just clicked mainstream. I want to refer to Aerosmith because what you guys are talking about reminds me of when they started writing songs with like Desmond Child, Marty Fredrickson.
Yeah.
It was different, but it was still Aerosmith. And it took a while to get used to, but I still like it.
Yeah, like I like Get It Grip a lot, but probably not really anything after that.
You know who's another group that was, and I love Sappy Foreigner, by the way. And so another group that I thought went like that had a really cool sound and really different, because I'm a big fan of horns, was Chicago, and then they went into the sappy thing.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, but I like that era too.
No, that's what happened in the 80s with a lot of bands. Like I'm a huge 80s Kiss fan to the point where I have an 80s Kiss tribute band called Quarantine that's coming to Jericho's, man. You got to come see us again.
I'll be there. I will be on the radio as well.
Okay, cool. Thanks. A lot of people bag on 80s Kiss because it's very poppy. Gene Simmons kind of dropped out. Paul Stanley took over. I fucking love 80s Kiss. It's my favorite era of Kiss. Same with 80s Rush. Same with 80s Van Halen. Same with 80s ZZ Top. A lot of people don't like it because they switch their style, but that's what you have to do to stay relevant. Right. You don't sell out. You just expand your horizon. Not every band can be AC/DC and do the same album every time and make it great. You got to expand your horizons, like we talked about with Led Zeppelin, for example, and do different things. And that's what makes a great rock and roll band great, is there's diversity and they're not afraid to take chances. And I love that.
Yeah. Give us your number one, Joe.
Well, Guns N' Roses. And I mean, speaking of sticking with the band through eras and changes, and I remember when they came out at the VMAs and Axl had the long braids and the big jersey and Buckethead was there and 80% of the country went, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it. I was asking people the next day, I'm like, you see that performance? That was awesome. People are like, what?
Yeah.
So I'm just a big Axl guy to this day, even the stuff that they put out here and there. And it almost made me anti-Slash for years too, because I stuck with my team, right? But I'm so glad him and Duff are back, and the show since they came back, it's just
GNR.
It's different.
GNR is my number two. And the reason being, GNR is my gateway band into hard rock.
Yeah.
Because I was enamored with him when I was in 5th grade, 6th grade, and a buddy of mine he said, if I like Guns N' Roses, you'll like them. And he gave me a cassette of Metallica recorded on a Casio cassette.
Yeah.
So Guns N' Roses, I was obsessed with that band. I still am. And they were my gateway band into Sabbath, into just a wormhole of hard rock. So they're easily my number 2.
Or you know what it is too? I would think a lot of people would agree that the first time they heard "Welcome to the Jungle" was like what, like they maybe thought the first time they heard it, like that's the percentage of people I wonder, like that's the best rock song I've ever heard. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like you probably have a decent amount of people that would probably say that. You know?
Yeah, well, and that was an immediate breakthrough for GNR too. That album, Appetite, is arguably the best debut album ever made. Right there with like Led Zeppelin 1. And one thing, and I'm a lifelong Guns fan. I've seen them like 40 times. I saw the faux Guns N' Roses a bunch of times with Buckethead.
Yep.
I often feel like their best work, though, was with Adler on drums, which didn't last very long because he had kind of a punky feel to his drumming. And then Storm came in and he was a more traditional drummer. It wasn't bad. It took an element away I liked.
Steven's got a swing to him that they've never been able to replace. So Konnan and I have discussed this probably years ago. I remember you asked me a question, like what bands were genre changing, you know what I mean? And Guns N' Roses is one of them. Just like Metallica was. And when Guns N' Roses came in '87, it was all about, if you weren't a thrash guy, you're talking, the Poison, Motley Crue, that sort of stuff. Guns N' Roses changed everything. You know, what JoJo's wearing right now, the headband with the hat over it. No one had that. That was an Axl Rose thing. It was like, how many fucking layers of shit does he have on his head? You know what I mean? I saw them on their very first tour ever in Canada. They were opening for The Cult. And they came out on stage, and I remember they said, of all the bands in the world, we're one of them. There's Guns N' Roses. And they just fucking started playing. It's like, who are these scumbags? Like, one thing I'll compare this, like, when I put together the Inner Circle in AEW, I love the look of this group. It reminded me of Guns N' Roses. 5 different guys that all look different, but it works. And that's what Guns N' Roses was. Steven was the glam guy, and Duff was the punk guy, and Axl's and then Izzy's like looks like Keith Richards, and it's just like who are these guys? They should
had a gimmick. They had a gimmick
by not even having one. They're just 5 fucking scumbags.
It was organic. It was a gimmick. It was organic.
It was organic, and people love that. And then once you said like, "Welcome to the Jungle," that was big. But what really pushed them over the edge, it was about a year into Appetite for Destruction was when Sweet Child of Mine came on the radio. I remember it was about a year later. Think about that. An album that was being worked for a year before it really hit. And Def Leppard Hysteria was like that too. You don't get that anymore. And when Sweet Child of Mine came, once again, that was the one where the chicks went, oh, we like this band.
And then Paradise City followed, and it was like hit.
About November Rain, my friend. Remember Polly used to use that for those
November ECW videos.
Remember that?
Bro, the best thing about Sweet Child of Mine, and the reason it was such a fantastic song, bro, listen to it like acoustic version with female vocals. Still, I like it's still just like out there, like it, and like nothing changes with that song. Like anybody, different genres can sing it with. You can do piano when it sounds fantastic. You know, so
Sheryl Crow does a version of it that's really good.
Yeah.
A great song is a great song, no matter who sings it. You could have, I always equate like to 5 guys standing around a burning barrel, like at the beginning of Rocky. Get you back. Like you could sing Sweet Child of Mine around that garbage can or any great song, and it's going to work. It doesn't matter who's singing it. It's a great song.
Right. So before I tell you my number 1, I want to throw this out there. And I don't know, because I'm not in the rock community. When you guys were talking about best first albums ever, I want to throw 2 out there that I don't think get enough love, or maybe it doesn't. I don't know it. I thought Boston's first was fucking great. Plus, they did it in their house.
Yeah.
That's
one guy. Tom Schultz did it. One guy.
Yeah, it's one guy and a singer did it all in his house. Yeah.
How incredible was that? That sound is still kicking today, bro.
It's
you know,
and every piece of mind on it. The first one
is a hit.
Yeah. Here's another one that I thought was kind of underrated, but great for its time. Peter Frampton.
Oh yeah. You talking about the live album?
Live.
Yeah.
You know what's funny about Frampton? he never sounded as good on studio as he did live.
Yeah.
I played that live album to this day.
Yeah.
I don't even remember where I put his studio stuff from back then. It's just, for some reason, he peaked live.
But there's a lot of bands like that. If you look at Kiss Alive in comparison to the studio albums, it's way better. And here's another one: Cheap Trick live at Budokan. Listen to the original. I Want You to Want Me. It's like a country song. It's not good. Live is when it becomes fucking rocking. You know. So there's a lot of bands in that era that sped up the tempo a bit live and added a little bit more of a rock element and just made things so much better.
And some of those bands broke because their live records did so well. Like Frampton Cheap Trick and Frampton. Like that's what broke them. And Kiss,
famous example, yeah.
So I'm going to tell you my number one, but it's funny to me because when I talk to young people, they're like, who? And I'm like, really? And so when I was young, I hated these guys because I was too young to appreciate who they were. And it was ubiquitous. They were on the radio 24/7. And then I appreciated them, the Beatles. Because to me, there was rock, like Elvis and, you know, that all that, you know, Chuck Berry and all that. And then the Beatles came along. And the great thing about the Beatles, besides having two great songwriters, you know, was that they, you know, they experimented. Like everybody's sounded the same back then. You know what I'm saying? You knew, but the Beatles did they get into indie music and going to see the Yogi, and they did psychedelic music, and they did, you know, hard rock, like, you know, and then they were kind of like the precursors to, like, you know how Led Zeppelin was kind of like one of the first ones I ever heard that did album rock? Like they did album rock. And if you remember back in the day, because I worked at a record store, all the people's cover was usually the singer in front smiling with the group. This was the first one that had like art, elaborate art, like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart. Like they brought the art game up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. The picture block cover.
Yeah.
Or just the white album. Nothing.
You know what's funny too is I at work I have my computer there, so I play music like, and the back is like when early in the night there's like not a lot of ambience in the club because it's like there's nobody there and you can't get this music inside. So before 8, the girls come in before 8 o'clock and they have to clock in before they get the cheaper housing. So sometimes I have like 7 or 8 or 9 girls in line just waiting, you know, their clock, they're standing in line, and I'll play. And it's kind of a right gimmick. I'll play Yellow Submarine, and all the girls will sing the chorus. We all live in a yellow submarine. So like
the thing with the Beatles, going off of what Konnan said, is that, like I mentioned earlier, 9 years, okay, as a recording band, 62 to 69, they created so many genres of music. And how do I mean that? Well, you talk about just the bubblegum pop of Love Me Do, or heavy metal with Helter Skelter, or let's say ska music with Obla Di Obla Da. Like you name it, and they recorded it first and kind of invented these different styles and sounds. We can't spend just 10 minutes talking about the Beatles. It's impossible.
Well, you'd have to get into the rabbit hole of this Paul McCartney.
Well, I mean, that's just
there is a whole thing about it.
Here's another thing too, is that what Konnan said, two great songwriters. Well, obviously Lennon and McCartney, two of the greatest of all time, but also George Harrison, who really came out towards the end of the Beatles, and then his solo stuff came out of the gate huge because he had so many fucking songs that Paul and John wouldn't accept. I always call myself the George Harrison of the Attitude Era. I was a super popular babyface, but I was in a company with the two biggest baby faces possibly ever in Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. There's no way I could get past them. And that's what George Harrison was like in the Beatles. As amazing of a songwriter, singer, personality as he was, he could never eclipse Paul and John. So he had to leave the Beatles to get his full, to spread his wings fully. They couldn't have lasted because there were two fucking talented, and even Ringo as well. Ringo's possibly the best drummer of all time for playing what's right for the song. Lars Ulrich is the Ringo Starr of heavy metal. He plays what's right for the song, not to show how many, you know, paradiddles he can do. So I mean, there's just fucking Beatles forever, man. That's
well, you're right. You're right about Harrison. Like I would make the argument that All Things Must Pass is the solo album ever done by a Beatle.
It's a triple album.
Yeah,
came out 6 months after they broke up. How many songs did he have written that they wouldn't take?
But that said, I think McCartney's solo work was exceptional too. It got really poppy, but it was really good.
Well, and the thing is too, Paul hit the ground running and kept going up until this day. John only had 5 years of solo stuff, 70 to 75, and then he quit to raise his son before he put out Double Fantasy, and then he got shot, 3 days later. So I think the fact that John was getting back to recording and writing, that it would be inevitable that John and Paul would have reunited probably about 86, 87. I don't know if George would have, but Paul and John would have for sure.
Nah, they would have. I think they would have, Chris. There would have been a Beatles reunion, however brief, because that was the time when the money would have just skyrocketed.
Yeah, you're right. But George was such a like a cool cat that didn't care about possessions and money, and he just wanted to garden. Like
maybe he would have done it for the legacy and for the fans.
Like with the Beatles, they would have got Eric Clapton or fucking some guy like that. That would have just, but like they would have done more music together, and that's one of the worst what ifs in rock and roll history. What if John Lennon hadn't been assassinated in December of 1980? Who knows what could have and might have happened?